Clearly, the Russian war in Ukraine has thrust cyber risk into the spotlight. Based on your conversations with clients and prospective clients, what are they most concerned about from a cybersecurity perspective?
Hi, yes, and thanks for having me. I think what's been interesting is to date, in terms of what we have seen, is it's been fairly noisy but fairly low-level activities at this moment that's been coming out of the current conflict. It feels like there's a little bit of flexing of muscles going on, maybe perhaps trying to be distracting of security teams. But talking to our customers, they are rightly concerned because Russia in particular has got a very powerful cyber offensive capability, as many nations do. And it's capable of having a real world impact. Great example of this was in 2016, where they plunged the capital of Ukraine into darkness by a cyber attack within their energy supplies. So they are capable of spilling over that activity and having that impact. So it's customers that are looking after critical national infrastructure that are rightly worried. Energy supplies, water supplies, and the likes of that. Anything where there's a real physical consequence of that cyber attack.
In response to the war in Ukraine, we've heard some major governments come out already pledging to ramp up their military spend, notably Germany and the United States. How much of that spend is likely to go into cybersecurity, given how big of a risk it is and that it really is a wartime tool nowadays?
I think it is absolutely capable of becoming a wartime tool. But cybersecurity is a challenge that many modern businesses are still yet to solve. And right now we're talking rightly about the conflict within Russia and Ukraine and how that could be really affecting critical national infrastructure. But let's not forget that in December, we were talking about the Log4j vulnerability and the foundations that many of our digital businesses stood on potentially hold this huge vulnerability. And that was rightly very worrying. And earlier in the year, they were worried about supply chain attacks and the likes there, or ransomware. So this is a constant narrative. Cybersecurity is a very real concern for businesses because businesses are built on digital foundations and we all rely and all depend on them. Anything that poses a potential disruption to those foundations is something that CEOs and business leaders are rightly very concerned about.
Poppy, leading up to this war, we would hear analysts speak a lot about how any war, especially one fought by Russia, would be fought by the West as well on a cyber front and on an economic front, this idea that it would all happen at an arm's length, if you like. However, we've seen tanks and infantry tactics in Ukraine like we haven't seen since the Second World War. Does this mean that the cyber warfare element was overblown, or is it happening in the background?
It's an interesting question, and many people working within the industry have been surprised that they haven't seen the high-profile cyber attacks that perhaps they'd be expecting or even capable of. And as I said earlier, it seems to be mostly at this point very noisy attacks that could be distracting security teams. Perhaps that's for other nefarious reasons, or maybe it's just an exercise in sort of flexing of muscles. Many speculations as well is that perhaps Russia was expecting the conflict to be over at this point, and they wanted to keep communications and the likes of that intact. But one of the things that we're also seeing that I'm mindful of as well is that especially at times when there is heightened tensions, especially around geopolitical situations like this, it becomes an easy camouflage for your criminal level cyber attackers. So your mass scale criminals are operating in the dark web that could be from any nation or operating against any particular motive. It becomes easy for them to obfuscate their activities and point in the direction of Russia. So we've seen here at Darktrace a number of cyber attacks where they appear to be coming from Russia, but that's not necessarily always the case, as it's a great way of camouflaging the standard criminal activity that you see within the cybersecurity industry.
And another interesting angle that's being sort of circulated around at the moment is that Russia is itself being hacked like never before. It is now fair game, more than ever, of course, to attack Russia in the cyberspace. And vast swathes of Russian data sets from state-run companies, oil and gas from government ministries have now been acquired. How powerful is that type of information?
It's hugely important. I think it's no surprise that all nations have some form of cyber offensive capabilities, and I wouldn't be surprised to see nations using that to enact influence between Russia, just as Russia is elsewhere in the world. Our businesses and our critical national infrastructure is a great source of influence and opportunity to enact geopolitical influence and power and control. And I would be very surprised if they weren't using cyber capabilities to enact that influence by operating control over those kinds of infrastructure.